Leonid Petrov is a visiting fellow at the College of Asia and the Pacific. He joins me now live from Sydney. Good to have you here with us on TRT World. So the fact that this is the first summit among US, South Korea and Japan goes to say a lot about the future of this partnership. So I wonder, what kind of immediate cooperative measures do you think are going to be discussed at this trilateral summit?
Yes, indeed. This trilateral summit is the first historical summit which is happening in one place, despite of the fact that President Biden and President Yoon and Prime Minister Kishida met several times already, most recently in Hiroshima during the G7 meeting, and also in Madrid NATO meeting in Europe earlier this year. This time it looks like, and it's a golden opportunity for the trilateral partnership to be not only strengthened, but also for this time. It may continue and become annual event and go beyond the tenure of President Yoon and Prime Minister Kishida and President Biden as well. It's very important to see the differences between Republic of Korea and Japan to be ironed out after 100 years of animosity and the history and legacy of colonialism, which peppered the 20th century. Sooner or later, Japan and Korea must collaborate, and also the U.S. participation in the region is also important, both economically, socially, and in terms of defense and security. I believe that this is going to be a very significant summit. Perhaps it may actually go to history as a success, or maybe as successful as the Camp David meeting and accord, which was reached by former President Jimmy Carter when Egyptian and Israeli leaders got together in the late 1970s. And I think that we live in the era of another Cold War, which potentially turned into a hot World War. So we must do everything possible to avoid this. And I think that this trilateral summit is going to make a significant contribution in this course.
Indeed. And Leonid, this is what I wonder at this point. To what extent do you think this summit has escalated tensions in the region? Because, see, we have already seen a statement coming from China. China condemns this summit, and now there are concerns that North Korea might conduct some missile tests right when this summit is underway.
Absolutely. China is very defensive of what happens in its vicinity in the Korean Peninsula, islands of Japan, and U.S. presence. But U.S. troops stationed in Korea and Japan since the end of World War II, and basically because of the U.S. presence there, the World War II was ended earlier than anyone could expect. So China believes that the general movement of the U.S. is actually plotting against its policy towards one China, against its Belt and Road economic initiative. So China feels very insecure about it, and Russia, which is under international sanctions, which is now basically turning into a not just autocratic but totalitarian regime, is also very proactive in consolidating support from China and North Korea. So that's why the Russian Defense Minister Shoigu visited Pyongyang just a couple of weeks ago. We saw that the liberation of Korea, the 15th of August, which happened 78 years ago, was commemorated not only in South Korea, but in the North. And the victory, as North Koreans call it, the victory in the Great Patriotic War, which is acronym for the Korean War, was also celebrated earlier this year in mid-July. The 70th anniversary of the Armistice Agreement on Korean Peninsula actually brings us to the situation where this neither war nor peace situation cannot continue for any longer. 70 years should have been enough to sign a peace treaty, but there's no appetite in North Korea. China is very insecure about Koreans potentially reunifying. And Russia these days is using North Korea as a buffer state against US-allied South Korea, and also buying weapons from the North Koreans in exchange for energy and some food, I believe.
All right, Mr. Leonid Petrov, thank you very much for talking to us here on TRT World. Really appreciate your taking out the time.